Hello and welcome to the morning sports briefing here on Tuesday, the 5th of May. Hi, I'm Paul and I'll be your host today here on New Zealand Sports Radio. You can watch live on our Facebook page, or you can listen to the recording on your best podcatchers. That's iTunes, Acast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all of those. So as you're walking around or doing the housework, you can listen to our dulcet tones. On the briefing today, Wellington to play in New South Wales, waxing lyrical in cricket, more NRL player indiscretions revealed, rugby slower than league, and rallying cancelled. And let's kick off straight away with that football news. And before we get on to the Wellington Phoenix story, Marcos Rijo is facing, the punishment again, or at least being berated. He was pictured with friends on several occasions over the weekend, smoking and playing cards. Previously, he had been seen playing football with his mates in the park. He's over in Argentina at the moment, and they're supposed to be in lockdown until May the 10th. So clearly he's been a naughty boy. His future at Man United was already in doubt. He'd been sent out on loan in January and only played one game this season. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him leaving the Red Devils sometime soon. Also in the Premiership, more clubs are open to using neutral venues as long as relegation is scrapped. Well, funny that, isn't it? Some of the teams down at the bottom who are fighting relegation have called into question the integrity of the league if they are not allowed to play at home. Whereas the Premiership is saying that, look, we should be taking a guide from the police and the ground security guidance as to which grounds we should use. Not all the grounds that were due to be used would necessarily be Premiership grounds either. But clearly this has upset some of those teams down the bottom who are scared for their survival. We'll have to see how that one plays out. Over in Germany, there have been 10 positive coronavirus results from the 1,724 tests that the league has taken. So it looks like there are a number of players have got ill. Those were done before they were back to practice. So you've got to wonder how many people they may have infected at practice, but it has been a graduated return, and a second wave of tests will be carried out this week. Over in Spain, La Liga is aiming to return in June as well, and they're returning to training this week. Again, it's one of those graduated returns, individuals, small groups, whole teams, kind of staged levels. Coming back here, though, the Phoenix, it looks like they may be restarting in August and looking at fitting in the final 6 rounds in about a month of time. This is all now more positive, having had that funding back that's paid by Fox Sport that we mentioned the other day. And there is a suggestion that basically all the players go to one, or all the teams go to one location, have a bubble, and play there for 4 weeks. Now, the union boss, John DiLuca, has come out and said, look, our players are used to going away on international duty for this sort of stuff, so it's going to be a big deal for them. And it's not the extended bubbles that you're going to see for some of the other sports. He does point out, though, that some players, especially over in Perth, have not been paid since March. So that's over a month that they haven't been paid. So, and also there is call into question as to if they do return in August. A lot of the players' contracts run out at the end of June, and they maybe have other contracts lined up which might be worth more, or they might be moving overseas. So how many players will the teams still have? Whilst FIFA has recommended extensions, some players may not want to do that extension. It is not it's not enforced, and some players have only got some teams have only got 10 players signed up for next season. So still a lot of questions there for the clubs to sort out. But as I say, they're looking at doing that in August, so they've got the best part of 3 months to get their act together on that one. Let's find out who or what is waxing lyrical over in the cricket as I hand you over to Ashwin.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning, listeners. Yes, in cricket news, Kookaburra developing a wax applicator to replace body fluids to maintain the ball. With officials opening up the idea or the prospect of looking at options to maintain the ball, Kookaburra have come with a wax formula on a little sponge that will be used to apply polish to the ball. Brett Elliott, the Kookaburra's group managing director, believes it could be ready in a month. So let's stay tuned and see what happens on that front. Obviously, we still have to wait for the ICC and MCC rule makers to actually authorize or allow officially the maintenance of ball utilizing something other than body fluids. But looks like there's a development happening there. Cricket Australia will soon have a line of credit of $50 million through their long-term partner Commonwealth Bank. This won't go down well with the 200 Cricket Australia staff who have taken a 20% pay cut until the end of June, which was supposed to save them $3 million. Also not happy is the Players Union, who believe that CA will have $50 million in reserve by the end of June, as well as now the $50 million loan, which they'll get from Commonwealth Bank. Negotiations still continue about a 25% pay cut with the state associations, who will obviously now have their 2 cents to say. Now, this is all in line on top of the fact that it's looking likely that they'll be able to play a series behind closed doors with India, which will bring in $300 million on that series alone. So stay tuned for financial developments with Cricket Australia. English Cricket Board of asking the government for backing for allowing games behind closed doors as well, but in the UK, in order to save the game from financial ruin. Tom Harrison, who is the ECB's chief executive, will front a digital, cultural, media, COVID-19 committee hearing. Along with 4 other governing bodies, they will be representing at that committee hearing to look at how they can proceed. ECB still holds out hopes that West Indies will be able to tour this summer and play their games behind closed doors. And obviously, it'll come down a lot to what the outcome of this committee hearing is. And that's our cricket news for today, Paul.
Thank you very much, Ashwin, for that. I'll hand you now over to Stephen, who'll take us through our birthdays today.
Thank you, Paul, and good morning, everybody. And birthdays this morning, a one-test All Black, a dynamic hooker with a big future, and a female Olympian. Jamie Lovett, born this day, 5th of May 1988, in Whakatane, is a New Zealand canoeist. Lovett, who turns 32 today, represented New Zealand at the 2016 Summer Olympics. She competed alongside Caitlin Ryan, Kaylee Emery, and Amy Fisher in the women's K4 500 metres event. Of Māori descent, Lovett affiliates to Waikato Tainui and Ngāti Raukawa. Moving on, Asafo Junior Amua, born this day, the 5th of May 1997, is a New Zealand professional rugby union player. Amua, who turns 23 today, plays as a hooker for New Zealand's super team, the Hurricanes, and the Lions at provincial level. The promising hooker picked up the New Zealand Age Group Player of the Year in 2017 and has since represented the All Blacks on 2 occasions. And finally, Benjamin Alo Charles Atinga, born this day, the 5th of May 1983 in Auckland, is a former New Zealand rugby union player who plays at centre and fullback. Atinga won multiple world titles for New Zealand at under-19, under-21 levels between 2001 and 2004. Atinga, who turns 37 today, played 1 test for the All Blacks against Tonga at the 2003 Rugby World Cup after being called into the squad as an injury replacement. Atinga played most of his career locally for Auckland and the Blues, but had 1 season with Otago and the Highlanders. Yeah, quite interesting. He's one of those players, when you talk about eligibility, who only played 1 test for the All Blacks, and it makes you kind of wonder if he's the sort of player that should have been released to have played for his Pacific Island. Not too sure whether he's Tongan or Samoa, but I think that's the sort of player we talk about when we think of eligibility, Paul.
Yeah, it is. And on Hash Rugby Chat this evening, we will be talking about how the World Rugby Championship vote went. Obviously, Bill Beaumont was the winner over Augustin Pouchot for that. And one of the things that Beaumont said he will review is those eligibility rules around those. So maybe we'll be discussing that and whether it's part of one of the reasons that Fiji and Samoa both backed him over Augustin Pouchot. So join myself, Stephen Harris, and John O'Connor for the Hash Rugby Chat this evening at 8 p.m. Also, in rugby news today, SANZAR have come out and said, look, there's all these rumours over the weekend as to what the future structure of Super Rugby will be. But the current 4 parties have all signed up to Super Rugby for the next 10 years. And also for the next 5 years, they have agreed a structure and a tournament structure for both the Super Rugby and also the Rugby Championship with their broadcast partners for the next 5 years. So they say that, look, everything that is being discussed at the moment is pure rumour in the press, and that actually nothing is currently agreed or even under discussion between the SANZAR parties to happen. So we'll see how much of that is, how much discussion is really going on, and how much that is actually, and whether things will actually change, or are we up for status quo for the next 5 years. Over in Australia, and it has been rumoured that the Australian Olympic boss may be replacing Raelene Castle. That is Matt Carroll. He has said that, look, whenever this job becomes available, I'm always spoken about, but I haven't spoken to Rugby Australia. I don't know where this has come from. So he is denying it, but he is an old rugby boy. He has been part of Rugby Australia previously between 1995 and 1999. And he has also had the chief executive role at the Waratahs as well. So, and he was also general manager of the 2003 Rugby World Cup that was hosted in Australia. So clearly he has got strong connections with Rugby Australia, but he's denying that he will be taking over that role. Former Wallabies captain Paul McLean has been the acting executive chairman since Raelene Castle stood down, but it looks like that Wiggs will be the person to replace him in, at least in the short term. He obviously of the investment company and also V8 Supercars. So it looks like he will be stepping up into that role. But again, this is all rumour, and let's be honest, Australian rugby has been a bed of rumours for us in this time of lockdown. And as I say, rugby is moving slower than league, and it looks like they've just submitted their 29-page return to play manual to the federal government. The NRL are obviously ahead and already on a long way down their path to returning. Rugby Australia is somewhat behind, unsurprisingly, when you consider the amount of turmoil they've been going through in their administration. So whilst the NRL is looking at returning on May the 28th, and I'm sure we'll get an update on that from Stephen soon, the Super Rugby sides are looking at starting in early July, a couple of weeks later, and also that is looking at they've put two proposals together involving the 4 Super Rugby franchises plus the Force, so a 5-game tournament competition, and then also a 6-game competition, including the Sunwolves. They're waiting on the cabinet meeting that's happening on Tuesday. But what has really perked up some ears is that Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand Prime Minister, will be attending that cabinet meeting. And so, obviously, the prospect of a trans-Tasman travel bubble is obviously on everyone's minds, and they're wondering whether, hey, could we actually have a cross-Tasman competition? So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of that council meeting. That cabinet meeting, and why Jacinda Ardern is there. It's unprecedented that she is there, and obviously that level of cooperation between the two governments does make it look like there is a possibility of travel between the two countries, and would be fantastic for sport. That's your rugby news. I'm going to hand you back over to Stephen, who will take us through our league update.
Oh, thank you again, Paul. Well, just when you thought the fires of the NRL player discretion had been doused, Kangaroos coach Mel Meninga has confirmed Latrell Mitchell and Josh Adokar were out late the night before Australia's shock loss to Tonga last season. The Sydney Morning Herald reported that the pair's camping trip was not their first indiscretion, and it again places doubts around Mitchell's professionalism. I didn't know it until after the event, but they were out scootering until pretty late, Meninga told the Sydney Morning Herald. Look, they were not out drinking alcohol. Our security made me aware that they were out until about 1 or 2 a.m. there were players from other teams as well. Meninga is one of Mitchell's biggest supporters and defended him despite the Rabbitohs signing facing criticism for his commitment in that loss to Tonga. I know we didn't have the best game with his hands, but there is no doubt he tried very, very hard that evening, Meninga said. The effort and competitiveness was there. Probably wasn't the best preparation, but they were not alone in doing that. However, Meninga admitted during the week that Mitchell and Addo-Carr had placed their kangaroo hopes in jeopardy by showing they couldn't be trusted during the COVID-19 lockdown. And just finally in league news, Gold Coast player Bryce Cartwright has reportedly been asked for a please explain after refusing to have a flu shot by the NRL. Cartwright and his wife were anti-vaxxers and have not been shy about going public with their views in the past. But in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and the rugby league fighting to survive, the NRL has put in place extensive and strict protocols which clubs and players must adhere to. There's a fear if one person tests positive, the entire competition might be shut down. On Monday, a number of people were turned away from club sessions. South Sydney players Latrell Mitchell, Adam Reynolds, and Liam Knight were all sent for tests, as well as Roosters coach Trent Robinson. The previous day, Warriors player Nathaniel Roach was ordered not to get on a plane with the team due to symptoms, but his test returned negative. The NRL has the power to ban Cartwright from training and playing if he does not comply and get the shot required. Just a footnote on those players, Latrell Mitchell and Adam Reynolds, and of course Liam Knight, they were all showing flu symptoms, and that's why they were sent for tests. Haven't heard anything back. Hopefully we'll know a little bit more when I'm back here for the league news tomorrow morning, Paul.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And wasn't one of the players who was on that cultural camp, isn't one of them that's had the symptoms, so may have passed it to other players who were there. So yeah, that was a clever move by them. It's interesting, isn't it, that one test might be enough to stop the NRL, whereas over in Germany we've had 10 tests that have come back positive already for the Bundesliga, and they are still powering ahead. So yeah, different standards being used around the world. Coming back now to New Zealand. Sorry, I've took myself off the screen there. Coming back now to New Zealand, and we're going to go on to motorsport now. Motorsport is going to be a big part of this last section. And unsurprisingly, the New Zealand Rally Championships have now been cancelled for this year. That's the domestic competition. But there is a prestigious World Rally Championship event to be held in New Zealand this year, as the Australian venue had deemed to be too small and they were looking for a new venue. So this was going to be a one-off event for New Zealand, not an ongoing event. So it was going to be the first time it happened here in a number of years. Now that is definitely under doubt, as is the Auckland round of the supercars. Staying on rallying for the moment, the Portugal rally and the Argentinian rally in April and June had already been cancelled, as has the Italian one. So look, 3 rounds have already been cancelled or postponed. Obviously the New Zealand one, they would love to get that redone later in the year, but we'll have to wait and see what will happen with that one. On the supercars side of things, while supercars is looking at coming back, it's also looking at coming back without crowds. So there's a big question mark: is it worth the expense of flying all of the equipment over to New Zealand for one race when there'll be no crowds at that race? So at the moment, they are looking into whether they will be hosting, or whether they will come over to New Zealand for a supercars round, or whether they will host them all in Australia. As it's on the TV, obviously that doesn't. That for fans, it doesn't make much difference. But you've got to say that you'd hope that wouldn't mean that this round would get cancelled permanently. Moving on to Formula One, and they have agreed new budget caps of $145 million for next year, plus other reductions over the future years as well. You'll remember that they were looking at trying to get down to 100 US dollars. And we discussed this about a couple of weeks ago, but they've ended up with a compromise between the 175 million that they had wanted and the 100 million, so ended up with 145 million. We'll just have to see how that progresses over the future years. A lot of the teams cannot afford the same money that the top teams in Red Bull and Ferrari can. Moving on to off the actual track and onto the computer, and Stoffel Vandenberg is fantastic at qualifying, but not quite so good at starts, it appears. He qualified for the pole position of the grid for 2 races over the weekend and managed to stack his car in the opening yards in both races. He's Mercedes Formula E driver, and on the first race on Saturday, he crashed within a few meters, causing mayhem. And then the following day in Formula 1's official esports series, he also put it into the wall, but managed to recover and finish in the top 10. So you've interesting there. This does show the difference between kind of esports and actual driving. Is that the drivers on esports, when you are in the real life drivers, are perhaps not taking it quite as seriously on there, or taking more risks at least, because they know there isn't the chance of physical damage. And there was a touring cars one done in Australia, which, pretty much every single car seems to have a pile up within the first 5 corners. But I think damage was turned off, so it all kept going. Finally, in NFL news, unsurprisingly, the 4 games that were planned to take place in London have now been cancelled. There were going to be 2 games at Wembley and 2 games at Tottenham's new Hotspur Stadium, but they have obviously been cancelled because of difficulties with travel. So unsurprisingly, that has happened. That makes you up to your son. Oh yeah, tongue-tied there this morning. Sorry, boys. You have started the day your best way, and you are now up to date with all the important sports news. Don't forget to join us at 8 a.m. every morning on our Facebook page here at New Zealand Sports Radio, or you can listen to us whilst you're walking around or doing the housework on the iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or Acast as well. Geez, boys, hopefully I'll manage to untie my tongue by 2 o'clock today, because we'll be streaming Olivia McDonald's interview with her. She is an international beach volleyball player. So check in for that. Thank you very much, Ashwin, and thank you very much, Stephen, for today.